So Fireside Palaver episode, whatever it is. This is going to be kind of a casual episode because I haven't finished reading the book. You've already finished reading the book, which is crazy.
So good.
Dude, I started before you. I got a good chapter or two ahead of you. And then I'm still not even quite at the halfway point, and you've already read this entire thing. It's so crazy. But we'll talk about I guess we could talk about as much as I've read. And then
we'll save it.
And then the next episode.
We can talk about the premise and everything, but we can save our
our deep philosophical
breakdown.
Yeah.
Because they're actually, for the first time, this book actually gives an actual philosophical opportunity to break down, because it is very metaphorical or whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of meaning in this book.
Yeah, that's what I love about sci-fi, man. It seems like sci-fi stories are always full of that sort of thing.
Right.
And I'm sure, I don't know, I think I was going to say I'm sure fantasy is too, but I think it's less so. I think Brandon Sanderson does, and there's other writers that do as well, but I think a lot of fantasy is escapism, and I don't think it dives into the real direct philosophical comparisons the way sci-fi almost always does, you know?
Well, a lot of sci-fi, it takes obviously takes place in the future, and so there's a lot of comparison about our culture now versus what a culture might be in the future. And Star Trek did it a lot, and all the various iterations of Star Trek, and a lot of sci-fi like this one. You do find those themes a lot in sci-fi, so it's very interesting. They do it very well. He doesn't. I keep wanting to say she is the writer just because it's a woman narrating it, but it's a guy who wrote the book. So
I didn't say we're talking about Children of Time by, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, Adrian Tchaikovsky. Tchaikovsky, yeah.
The music composer Tchaikovsky.
Oh, no idea.
Okay.
I'm not that cultured. I don't know anything about it. Have you done anything interesting this week? Any projects going on or anything?
No, I haven't really done anything interesting. We're getting ready to go out of town this weekend, but other than that, no. Yeah, we're going to go see my parents and chill at the beach for a couple days.
Oh wow! What beach are you going to?
North Myrtle.
North Myrtle. Okay, yeah.
Like North Myrtle.
Yeah. We're going
way up there.
We're going to Murrell's Inlet at the end of October.
Okay.
The opposite, South Myrtle, I guess.
Yeah. My parents live down there now, so.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I used to have, so I have family in the Wilmington area, which I think is kind of, I don't know, I'm not good at geography. I think
it's pretty close.
I've got one project. I knocked down a wall in the house, and I'm trying.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, so you know how whenever you enter our foyer, and then there's the stair, the stairs are right there, and it didn't have a railing. It just had a wall right there. That was kind of like a wall railing kind of thing, like a half wall. So I've knocked all that down, and I'm trying to put up railing there to make it look more open, as my wife would say.
Right.
But I can tell you that knocking it down was the easy part. So I'm now on the hard part of trying to put it back together, but differently. So working on that. Haven't found any Amazing Fantasy 15 in the walls or Action Comics #1. Still waiting for that to happen. This house was built in 2020 though, so I don't think I'm going to run into any of that.
So that's finding something like this. I got a story to tell you about the local Anderson comic shop. My brother-in-law, he's a big he goes around to all these places all over the upstate of Georgia, all over Greenville and here. And he goes to all these little thrift shops and stuff and looks for all kinds of stuff. And he turns around and sells things. And he's very knowledgeable about, he really likes toys, but he's big into comics too.
Okay,
but anyway, so he goes to the comic shop and he's looking through the $1 bin in the comics.
Yeah.
And he sees a comic. It's a 4-pack. And then on one face is the New Mutants 99, and on the back side is X-Force. I think he said 1 or 2.
It's is it the other Deadpool appearance?
So Yeah, and so he's like, I'm gonna buy this, only $1, it whatever. He takes it home and he's like thinking about it. He goes, I'm gonna open this up and see what the other two comics that you can't see in there.
Yeah.
And he opens it up, and behind 99 is 98, which is the first appearance
Oh my
of
gosh. Yeah.
Deadpool, and then X Force 2 or whatever. So it was 98, 99. The 99 was the last edition of New Mutants, and then it was 1 and 2 of. So it was like the whole Deadpool
That's
thing.
crazy. Yeah.
So he looks it up, and he's like, the 98 issue is worth about $500.
Yeah, because it's the first appearance. Yeah.
Because it's the first appearance. So he's like, I just got a first appearance for $1 from them. And he's like, I'm going to go back down there. So he goes back, finds the same pack.
Oh my god.
And he buys that one for $15. So now he's got two first appearance Deadpools. He said he spent like $17 and some change.
This has been my recent obsession. I have ADD and I go week to week. I have different obsessions. My comics have been my recent obsession, and I don't have that one. I don't have New Mutants 98. It's the Liefeld cover though, with the crazy long legs. Like Deadpool has like huge frog legs. I do have 2 copies of that X-Force #2, which I think is the better cover. But it is definitely worth less than the first appearance. But I got 2 copies, and I think I found one in a dollar bin before the Deadpool movies. And then the second copy I bought at a Dragon Con like the same year that the first Deadpool movie came out, and I think I paid like $20 for it. So that's the difference. That's one thing I was telling my wife too, is like right now I've been collecting the Jim Lee X-Men run. Either there's the Chris Claremont Uncanny X-Men, and then there was a X-Men that was just Jim Lee, and those you used to be able to get in dollar bins all day long, and now they're like $7, $8, $9, $10 depending on which ones it might be. I was actually looking at one that's like $100. So they're like, and I was telling my wife, I was like, I know I'm getting older because books I used to buy for $1 are now, $10. And they're only going to continue to get worse, get more and more expensive. But yeah, that's been my recent obsession, is going through all my comics.
When he found it, he was like, he said, he tried to look it up and he couldn't find like any kind of information on this 4-pack. Like he was like, I went all over the internet looking at, and there was just nothing about it.
Yeah.
And it had to have been just something because I think Deadpool was introduced, maybe 96, 97, 98, somewhere in there.
Well,
he said it was probably like a special thing because he said it has the little metal hook where it would just hang on the rack. And he's like, it's probably just a promotional thing that the Marvel did just to give you the 4 like essential Deadpool episodes.
So 91 was whenever that second appearance came out, but I don't have the first 4.
It was early 90s.
Yeah.
I remember being in college when Deadpool was introduced. I remember it was a big deal. Like everyone was all excited about it because it was so different. But yeah, like I was like, man, I'm going to go down there and search through all their stuff now and see if I can find some crazy.
I have a similar success story. I kept talking about that game Disney Lorcana.
You're right.
Did I tell you about the card that I got from that I turned over? So I was waiting on that game to come out. I had been waiting for a few months, and it finally did. Becca and I would go to the store here in Anderson that's allowing you to buy like 4 boosters and a starter deck, but they're rationing out what they have because it's selling out everywhere. So then we drove to Greenville, to one of the stores there in Greenville, and they were doing the same thing. You could buy like 4 boosters. I actually think they were doing 4 per person, and so we bought 8. Just Becca and I each got 4.
Yeah.
And so what is that? 12 boosters. We opened them all up. We had 1 starter deck, and we built another deck, and then we learned to play the game, and that was it. Well, I'm watching a YouTube video later that night of somebody opening booster packs, and he gets to this one Mickey card that's like a full art Mickey card, and he's like, "Oh my gosh! Oh wow! I can't believe I pulled the enchanted Mickey or whatever it is." And I was like, "That card looks really familiar. Like I'm like 90% sure that I got that card." And then I showed the video to Becca, and Becca's like, "I'm positive that we got that card." So we went down and looked at it, and sure enough, we had the same card. and it's like one of the rarest cards in the set. They had
Wow.
like four really rare cards. There's an Elsa, a Mickey, and like I don't know what the other two are. One is like a Hades, I think. But I immediately put it on eBay, and I've already sold it and shipped it off. I've already sold it, shipped it, and got the money back. It sold for $290.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I'm not even like, that was my fill. I'm not even interested in the game anymore. That was like, now I'm like, all right, I got what I wanted out of it. I feel like I came out ahead. I should just stop before I spend more money on it.
Did you see that guy? I think he's in Canada that pulled the One Ring card.
Yes, yeah,
and sold it to Post Malone for $2 million, essentially.
So wild. That's
I know, right?
What a fitting thing for Wizards of the Coast to do, though, to make a single card for the One Ring. Like, it's such perfect, like, thematically.
And they made like, what is it, 9 for the humans and whatever the other. So they did all those too.
Yeah, that's really.
But they're not as rare, but still. Yeah. I mean, 9 out of all the packs is still pretty rare.
But so the funny thing about that is, so I think that card you had to get it out of like a collector's booster. So the person that got it was probably looking for it. It's not like,
oh sure,
because
it was just random, yeah.
Right, it's not like you could just get like a pack from a booster pack from Target, and some kid gets it screaming at a register and then doesn't know what it is.
Willy Wonka, I got the golden ticket.
Yeah, it had to be somebody that was looking for it. Thank God.
Right.
But similar in our situation with the Mickey card. I had no idea. I knew that some cards are going to be more valuable than others, but I wasn't looking for anything specific. I hadn't researched it.
Right.
And, we're letting Elliot play with the cards. Like, we're not even,
right.
I just told him, I said, hey, don't bend any of them. But we let him. He was, all day long, he was pulling out all the villains and stacking them up and stuff. And we were like, holy cow, this card, there was a $300 card in there. We didn't even know.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's exciting news. What was I lost my show notes of completely.
I know we can jump into the Sanderson stuff if you want to.
Oh yeah.
The updates on the book.
In a way, I think this goes hand in hand. And let me tell you why. All right. So I don't want to sound too negative. I'm a Sanderson fan here. We stan Sanderson. All right. So don't come after us in the comments saying that we're Sanders haters.
No, definitely not.
No, definitely not. This podcast might as well be the King and Sanderson podcast because all we talk about is King and Brandon Sanderson. But so the first news item we have is Brandon Sanderson gives an update on Stormlight 5, and we shouldn't expect to see it until fall of 2024. Now, the reason why I say it's connected to the other news item, which is we have a quote from Sanderson. This is from actually, I've only ever seen a screenshot of this message from Sanderson on I think it's the subreddit for Mistborn. But I saw it on a credible source. It was one of the popular booktubers that's even had Sanderson on his show before. Like he's like super popular. And so I don't think he would have reported on it if it wasn't credible. So I think it's credible, but it's a quote from Sanderson talking about how the writer's strike and other things within Hollywood have affected the possibility of an adaptation for anything in the Cosmere universe. And the reason I say these two items are connected, and we'll talk about them both individually, but the last time Sanderson gave like the big Sanderson update thing that he does, one of the things he mentioned, I think last year, was that we wouldn't see, or earlier this year, that we wouldn't see book 5 because of the Hollywood news. Right. One of the things. And then now it turns out that wasn't as far along as we thought it was. I'm not making the claim that Sanderson said that it was further along than it really was. He never said anything at all. But my impression was, the Hollywood adaptation of a Cosmere story of some kind, or I thought it might be an anthology, like we get like a different Cosmere story, kind of thing.
Right.
Like every episode's like a different story. I thought it was so far along that's what was postponing book 5, but it turns out that can't be true. And according to this article, book 5 is being postponed just because it's so damn long.
Right, exactly. Well, I mean, I'm sure, like, so the whole news is that finally they were going to do an adaptation of some sort for him,
Yeah.
and then I'm sure they were having meetings and doing all this stuff, and he was probably getting with other writers, and I would imagine he's probably going to, especially for the first few episodes of any adaptation, and maybe even the season, that he's probably going to be the screenplay writer.
Yeah.
And then, like, just like any other things, other writers come in and start writing individual, episodes, things like that.
Right.
But you throw in the writer strike, and then all of a sudden you can't have meetings. You can't, like, it's basically you're stuck. So
yeah,
at that point, and I don't think that, I'm sure that no one expected the writer strike to go on as long as it has, that, because I mean, it's been months. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know exactly when it started, but I know it's been going for a while. So, like, at first, I'm sure he was like, well, we'll get over this little hiccup, and then once they come back, we'll get right back into it. But now it's like, okay, I've got to go do other things. I can't, like, put book 5 on the back burner anymore. I can't because I mean, he writes like so much stuff, like,
yeah.
So I mean, like, it's hurt him, especially trying to launch something brand new. Because I mean, like, these big series are risk. Like, you've seen several adaptations of things trying to go. I mean, like, even Amazon made the Dark Tower thing, and they only did a pilot and then canceled it. And then, the new season of the Ring of Power. Speaking of, like, Lord of the Rings, I mean, I know that's been delayed.
Well, let's read. Let me read that first. Then so let me read what Sanderson said. It touches on all this that you're saying. So he was asked when we would see a Cosmere adaptation. He says, as I indicated 2 months ago, in the comment linked in this thread, don't hold your breath. I think we're completely stalled at this point, folks. Not just because of the strikes. They're a relatively small issue in regards to what we were trying to do. We got really close in some ways. I'll be able to talk about eventually. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I know, right?
But I don't see any kind of film/TV announcement coming this year. Hollywood is scared. Even Mission Impossible is underperforming. I think that's a hilarious, like, I wouldn't have expected Mission Impossible at this point to be overperforming, but okay. Even Mission Impossible is underperforming, and Rings of Power did far beneath what they wanted. Now that, I think that is probably a really big indicator right there. That Rings,
because I mean, that's Sci-Fi, right?
Yeah. If it had done really well, then yeah, they'd be like, all right, Sanderson, get your butt in here, let's write this show, Yeah,
because then the producers get scared. They're like, oh,
yeah,
because any kind of adaptation from Sanderson is going to be very expensive to do. And if they can't get their return on that, and if they see, like, even Lord of the Rings can't, perform, then why are we going to sink all this money into a lesser known person?
So what we would say as fans of Brandon Sanderson and Lord of the Rings and fantasy writing in general, what we would say is that, well, you have Brandon Sanderson. Like, the problem with Lord of the Rings was that it was so far removed from the source material, and you can't work with the author, like. All you can do is work with the estate, and they were even limited in what they were allowed to use. And so they, it's so far removed from the source material. Right. But obviously, Brandon Sanderson wants to do this, and, it would be, but to a studio exec, they just see, oh, well, we tried this fantasy series and it didn't work, so we shouldn't expect this one to. It's a risky move in their mind.
Right.
He goes on to say, I think at this point I might have to try some smaller forays. Not Stormlight, not Mistborn, maybe not even Cosmere, into Hollywood to build a reputation before I can get the kind of adaptation I want. We'll see. There still are a few possibilities in the works that could turn this around. If it does happen, it won't be for an announcement this year. Yes, so it's I wasn't expecting an announcement. When he says this year, is he referring to 2024 next year or
I mean, I would assume he's talking about 2023, even though
I wouldn't
getting
expect
close
an announcement
to the end
this year. Yeah.
No, definitely not.
We would hear more rumors before we had an announcement this year.
I think it's interesting that he says he would try some small forays. Like that would be like a cool, like you were saying, maybe just like one-off episodes of just Brandon Sanderson stories. Like
I really think
I'm assuming it would just be made up stuff.
What's that book of short stories from the Cosmere? I'm looking at my
article now. Yeah,
see what it's called. They could do a show like that where basically it's just they could put Lift in an episode and tell that story of the interlude. And
right.
They could do all these different stories from all, and it could have like a kind of a thread that goes through it all. And even if you're not a Sanderson's fan, you could kind of see that like, oh, these stories kind of connect in a similar way. Like they all kind of have this, maybe they could have wit in a lot of the stories, and you start to see like, oh, this guy pops up in all these. Right. In all these various stories, or other characters that are like Cosmere travelers.
Well, you could definitely do it as like a prequel to just kind of introduce you to what the universe is like.
And then that would open the door to like, okay, well now you can do a Stormlight show and you can do a Mistborn.
Right.
You don't have to choose one or the other. But that's probably even riskier though, because if you do a Stormlight, if you said, okay, we're going to do Stormlight Archive all the way, then what Netflix or Amazon or whoever it is that's promoting it, they can promote it as such. They can say, this is for Stormlight fans, and try to premiere it as this huge event, this big television thing. Versus if it's the Cosmere kind of anthology thing, then they can't really advertise it like that same way. It's like, this is Sanderson, made for Sanderson fans kind of thing.
Right.
I don't know, but I think the more and more I remember reading the last book, Rhythm of War. I kept thinking it's going to be an animated series, but like a serious.
That would be so good.
Yeah. Like, have you watched the Amazon Invincible series at all?
I've heard it's really good. I have not watched it.
So it is really, really good. And I read that comic. That's another comic obsession. I have a lot of those. I actually bought the first trade paperback, and then I started buying the issue. So I'm missing like the first 20 or so, which are worth like that. Actually blew up to be a really issue number one. Of that is like very valuable. But Invincible, like it is, they did a really good job of making it feel like you're watching the comic in this animated series, and I don't think that it would have been any better if it had been real actors and not voice actors. I think they did such a good job. Even season 2 just started, and it follows the other character from the series. And I was just thinking, it kind of harkens back to the writer's strike even too, because I know that one of the things in the writer's strike was that there was some contract to do AI voices for voice actors and stuff. And I remember when I watched that first episode of season 2 of Invincible, I thought you would never get that performance from any AI. Like, there's no way you can replace.
I don't see that.
And I think about Mark Hamill as a voice actor. Like, there's no way. There's just certain, I've heard stories of these voice actors like crying on set, playing their parts, and like you'll never recreate that with AI. But anyway, I think that level of animated series would actually suit Stormlight Archive, maybe even better than live action. And
well, I mean, you could exactly, because there's so much crazy things that happen as far as how. I mean, obviously they can do all kinds of crazy things with anime or like CGI and all this stuff, but I just feel some of those things would be so awesome in like a comic form. I mean, like the new Spider-Man movies are so well done.
Yeah,
I can just see that like playing out, watching it on a big screen TV. Like it would be so good.
That was the other moment I had that thought, was like Gwen Stacy and her dad's performance in that movie. No way, that you could never recreate that without real actors taking that 100% seriously. Yeah, I actually am kind of rooting for animated over live action for Stormlight specifically. Mistborn may be different. I haven't finished the first Mistborn book, so I don't know enough of the story, but it seems more, as grim dark as Brandon Sanderson is, it seems more grim dark than Stormlight.
Well, I can just the shard plate vision in animated style, just like all that stuff surrounding that, like with the the blade and like all that would I think come through so well I'm thinking like Voltron, like, with the big sword, like that would be so cool. Like, I would be down for an animated version.
It doesn't get rid of so he comments on the writer's strike, and it doesn't get rid of that. You still need writers, no matter what, you need writers. So it doesn't get rid of that part of it, but I wonder if it does remove some of the anxiety to studios. Would they be more likely to invest in Stormlight as an animated series?
Right.
I mean, because I think Invincible has been successful. That's just my feeling.
It has been too. I think it has.
Yeah, I've heard more people talk positively about Invincible than about the Lord of the Rings TV show, the Rings of Power. But he says that the writer's strike is a relatively small part of this, which leads me to believe that they weren't even that far yet in this negotiation process. So I think it's really more about the industry feeling comfortable investing in something like this. So the article on book 5, we have so it says that Brandon Sanderson, he says, when will the book come out? I'm looking at fall of 2024. I have tried to be very forthcoming about this one, warning people for a while that 2023 might be too optimistic. So I can say this is true. I've watched a bunch of those. I haven't watched every one, but those monthly Sanderson update things, he always gives like a percentage of how far he is. And I remember I saw one a few months ago, and it was at like 30%. And I was like, there ain't no way. There's no way this book's coming out this year. Because it was the next one, it moved from like 30 to like 33. It was like, it's like, there's no way it's coming out this year. So I think all along I've kind of been thinking 2024. I'm not really surprised by this article. So he goes on to say, I've been forced to let the date slide quite far into 2024 because of 3 issues. The first is that I set myself up for a ton of revisions this year, and they've been taking more time than expected. I still have 2 books to revise, though I've been spending all of August on Stormlight. That isn't the primary reason I've ended up pushing the book back. I'd planned for these revisions and could have done those for a while working on Stormlight. The second reason I pushed the book back is that I knew this book, of all the ones in the sequence, deserved a little extra time and attention. It will likely be the longest of the series to date, and I have to be careful to juggle all the storylines properly. So they've often said that Stormlight Archive is going to be 2 story arcs in 5 books. So this is in a way kind of a closure of That's my interpretation anyway.
That's what I think too.
And
that's probably why it's so big, because it's you're kind of closing one chapter and then opening that next chapter, and it's like,
and what the heck? I don't know what to expect.
I know, right? 2,000 pages.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It is already. I mean, the books got thicker and thicker. I'm pretty sure they all got a little bit longer.
Yes,
like Rhythm of War is the longest, maybe only by a small margin. But yeah, I remember when we first got The Way of Kings, I was like, I'm never going to read this giant book. I'm never going to get through this thing. And then now I look at them all on my shelf, and The Way of Kings is like nothing. It might as well be The Gunslinger. Like, it's nothing compared to these.
Exactly.
They just get longer and longer. And yeah, Brandon Sanderson, how do you expect to finish a book in in a certain amount of time? You keep writing them longer and longer, but they are so good that I don't want them to end also. So I'm not complaining here, really. I'm just kind of being tongue in cheek, but yeah, I don't know how the story's going to round out. I think that it makes sense to me that this is going to take the most attention to detail, because I bet he is. You know how every book kind of focuses around like 3-4 characters at the max,
Right.
Like, we didn't get much of Dalinar in Rhythm of War because we got a lot of Dalinar in Oathbringer and The Way of Kings.
Yes.
And it kind of just picks like a handful of characters to follow for this period. I think this 5th book is going to be like a little bit of everybody. I think it's good.
Exactly.
It's got to close all these loops. And I bet that's why it's so difficult to write, because he's having to essentially write what he would write in 2 Rhythms of War, but then cram it down to being 1 book. So yeah,
3,000 pages.
This is going to be a honking book.
Yeah, it is.
I just want to say, Brandon Sanderson, I wouldn't be offended if you just broke it into 2 books.
Right.
I still wonder if this is the right business model to release one giant book every few years. You could just release one book a year.
Knock them down to 1,000 pages.
Yeah, just split them down to the same amount of content released over a shorter period of time. It's like Half-Life 2, episode 1, episode 2, episode 3. So anyway, don't be expecting that until fall of 2024.
Yeah, so it'll be a long time before our next review of the Stormlight Archives.
Well, we haven't read the prologue. We haven't read the prologue out.
That's true.
It's out. It's released, and I've heard some stuff about it. I think we need to read it before I get spoiled too much on it, and then at least give us a teaser and something to look forward to. But man, we're talking about fall 2024. We got an entire year.
Right.
We got more than an entire year before we're actually going to read this book. That's crazy. That's the thing about being into fantasy literature now is people wait for so long on these books to release, and human beings don't have a finite amount of time. The author could pass away, you never know what could happen.
George R. Martin.
You may never get the conclusion of some of these series.
We know now it seems like everything is a series. There's not a whole lot of standalone books and things like that anymore. It's all like series of this and series of that. Now some people push about because they maybe write a 300 to 400 page book and they're just popping out all these books, usually once a year or something like that. Now these epic tomes like this, now they're very, I wouldn't say they're unique, but I mean, in a way, you don't see many authors writing, 1,500 pages with every one of their books. So that's definitely unique, I think, to Sanderson, but
it's dense in 3 different ways to me. So Sanderson books have a lot of pages, but they also have a lot of words. So we read the most recent Stephen King book we read was a similar number of pages, but a lot fewer words. Yes. And then also, Sanderson is basically famous for not doing prose. His writing is, every sentence is a plot point, so they're dense.
Exactly.
They're dense books. That's what I really like about him. The third reason he gives for pushing back this book, I don't even know that we could really say pushing back. He never said it was going to come out in 2023. But the third reason is he talks about how he has been running the company. He's been more and more involved in running the company. And I think that comes from, Sanderson being way more of a brand than he's probably ever been in his career.
Right.
He's not just an author. He's there's the Sanderson verse,
so he's writing one less day a week than he was before.
Do too much.
Maybe. I mean, that's legit.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking that with the Kickstarter books. So I signed up for the Kickstarter. I've gotten my books behind me. I've only read one of them because I don't know. I would have rather sacrificed the Kickstarter books. He never read those, but yet we got the 5th Stormlight book a little bit quicker, Well,
I mean, even up in the front of this article, he said he's still got 2 other revisions for things to do too. So I mean, he's doing Stormlight, he's doing Mistborn, and he's doing other things too.
Whenever he does his Sanderson update, it's a bunch of stuff he's working on, and some things he is coordinating. Well, he's with everything he's coordinating with other people. He has a large team of people that help him with these books, but there's a few books that he is sort of writing through another author, and the other author is on the book, but he's I don't know if it's a producer for it or what, but he's involved in so many things. All you and I know is Stormlight. So this could be our opportunity to catch up on Mistborn while we're waiting on book 5 of Stormlight to come out.
Right.
I have started reading it several times, and if it wasn't for the podcast, I would have read it by now. But I start it and then we usually pick something else, and I can't do like you where I can read 2 books in a time period that it takes me to read one. So I usually I give up and come back, but eventually I do want to read what I've read of it so far. It feels different than Stormlight Archive. It's not the same. Stormlight Archive feels very heroic and bubbly in a way compared to Mistborn. Mistborn is much darker, it's the Batman to Superman, you know what I mean? It's Gotham City to Metropolis. So anyway, that's the Sanderson news. You want to talk about the Stephen King book? I was telling you just before the show that I've been seeing a book at the register at Target. I think it's called Holly. Okay.
So again, kind of in the vein of series, it's another book it's not a true series, but like, so he had the Mr. Mercedes, the 3 books, and then he's written If It Bleeds, and then there was The Outsider, and he introduces Holly in the Mr. Mercedes stories, and then she's in If It Bleeds, that's a collection of like a few short stories, and she's one of the short stories, and then the other one, The Outsiders, like a standalone book with her, and then this is the next book like that's just solely focused on her. So I just started it yesterday, and it's good so far.
But it's part of that. It's part of that.
Yeah,
series.
It's the same character, like over. It's a completely different story, but she's like a detective type person, like a private detective.
Mercedes show.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
She's the kind of weird. She's not. I don't. They never really say. I don't think that she's autistic, but she kind of comes across that a little bit. She's the blonde in the Mr. Mercedes, and then they also did. I forgot who did The Outsider. I think it was HBO did The Outsider.
Okay.
Series, which was pretty good. But yeah, I mean, it's he seems to have latched onto this character because he even said when he wrote the Mr. Mercedes beginning, she was just like a side character, and then he kind of fell in love with the character and has decided to keep it up. I'm gonna get the I'm listening to it, but I am gonna get the hardback because apparently there's some really cool covers. There's one that's like a glow in the dark cover.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of a sought after thing. So he's busy still writing.
I thought
it was a good thing.
I thought it was I didn't know if it was a new book or if it was like a seasonal book or something that was being re-released. And the reason I thought it was called Holy is because I thought it was like Christmas related or something. But I guess we're not even close enough to Christmas. I don't know why I thought that.
But that's a character that some people have really latched onto, then some people complain about it. But I think she's pretty good.
Is she the Stephen King's Lift? Is she like Lift?
Kind of, yes.
Yeah,
now I'm really at the beginning though. One thing I've kind of seen from people talking about the book is that he is very outspoken politically.
Yeah.
And apparently like some of that plays into this book a lot.
Really?
With his views, and so like you get the one side saying, hey, it's his views and he can do whatever, and if it's a good story, who cares? And there's other people like down with that stuff and just write a book and blah blah blah.
I don't mind it. I don't mind it when an author does that.
I don't either, as long as it fits the story.
It would be weird if it felt sideways, like jammed in there, but.
Right.
But I can't imagine Stephen King's doing that. I've imagined
no. Yeah, so it's all the other books with her in it I've enjoyed, and the short story I've enjoyed. So and kind of jumping into that next topic with how characters have changed in series, she's been there's good examples of characters that change in good ways and then ways that they change in bad ways. She's been a good one, like at the beginning, she was like a very timid, like mousy, like she lived under the thumb of her mother. And then in the detective in the Mr. Mercedes, Detective Hodges, he like kind of brings her out of that shell, and she winds up being very good at deductive reasoning and different things, and like now she's kind of on her own at this point doing her own detective stuff, and it's a really good arc in how she's developed over these books. And so kind of going back to the Sanderson stuff, like having characters that stay consistent and grow in natural ways is pretty difficult. And Sanderson's really good at it. And I think King is very good at it. And I've read, several other series where they do a really good job. And I think I told you I've been reading this other series takes place back in like, I think we're finally into the 1700s now, and it takes place in the colonial America. And there's like the kid's kind of like the early American Sherlock Holmes. He's like really smart and really like really good at also at deductive reasoning, and like he's been played up in the early books as this outstanding person, and then like in the third book his character is completely different. And it like I even went through the Amazon reviews, and like review after review after review, they were like, that's not the same Matthew Corbett character from the other two books. And like, so he had been
what's the name of that series?
It's I mean the detective's Matthew Corbett. I don't know if there's actually a name for the series, but it's
I got you.
But he's like I said, he's very proper. He's very by the book, and he does things a certain way and does it the right way. And then in this third book, like he completely goes off rails. Like they're searching for a serial killer that they're basically transferring him from this mental institution. They're supposed to take him to New York, and along the way, the guy's like, I'll give y'all, it was Matthew and his partner. He's like, I've buried treasure out of this place, and I'll give it to y'all if y'all just let me go. And it's something that he would never in a million years agree to. And then like he goes along with it and agrees to it, and like all of the stuff that happens, it's just like when I was listening to it, I was like, that makes no sense. Why would this character that from the first two books would never, the way he built up this character, would never act this way or do these things? And it felt like it was more of just to move a plot along, just to create a story, and you get away from the essence of that character. And then now I'm up to like book 8, and like his character's all over the place. Wow. And even though the stories themselves stand alone are good, it's just the character doesn't make sense, because like in the next book he's back to like how he was before, and then like he's supposed to be this genius, and then he makes these just like idiotic mistakes or doesn't think about things. And like so when I read a book and something's happening, I'm like thinking like what's going to happen, or this is what I think is going to happen, and like the smart idea would be to do this, and then he does something that he doesn't think of within the story. You're like, why wouldn't he think of that within the story? Like there's a part where like these people are trying to get him to give up the name of this guy that's killing people as revenge, and he knows the guy's name, but he could have spun the whole story about how he found out without actually giving the guy's name away. It'd been very easy, because the guy gives him this book, and he's like, I want you to figure out what this stuff in this book means. And he could have simply said, hey, this killer like grabbed me, he gave me the book, and he said, figure this out. I never saw him. But he makes up some totally outlandish story that is easily disprovable. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, you're supposed to be like the smart guy. But, it's, again, the stories themselves are really good. Like, I've enjoyed them, and I'll keep listening, because I think I've got one more to listen to before I'm caught up. But I just sit there and roll my eyes sometimes, like, oh my God, like, what are you doing? Like,
I'm trying to think of and
the guy's a really good writer. It's Robert McCammon. He writes. He's written a few other books that I've read outside of that story. One's a really good apocalypse story, sort of like The Stand.
Yeah.
And he's very much a Stephen King type guy, because he wrote, like I said, that book is sort of reminiscent of The Stand. Then he wrote this other book about these kids battling like these demons and stuff that's very reminiscent of it.
But in the other books that he's written that you've read, do you feel this same dilemma of the character just being out of character?
Definitely.
Oh, really? So this is something that maybe as a writer he struggles with?
Maybe, because all the other books are just standalone books, and this is the only, like, as far as I know, it's the only series he's done. And it's just, I think he comes up with a plot idea for the book, and he starts writing the book and doesn't bother with what he's written previously, other than like history.
I think that this would be my dilemma as a writer too, because I can usually come up with good plots and like sort of like a story outline, but not the details. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that's why that's why not everybody can do this. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But it's interesting. So because of that dilemma, you put in the show notes to talk about how characters change over the course of series. And do you,
And like I said, like
this sounds
we'll
like a
take
bad
Dalinar.
change. Yeah.
Well, Dalinar, like he starts off with this as this like just brute kind of like death to everyone, blah blah, and he grows over this series to be like this.
But did he
different.
though? To me, Dalinar, from the perspective of the reader, has not changed all that much, because in the Way of Kings, we see Dalinar kind of as he is in Rhythm of War.
But you get the flashbacks and
But
stuff
then
that
in the
kind of show you
flashbacks,
from
we find
where he
out
was.
where he was. Right, exactly. And we see that the character has changed. Versus Kaladin, who we actually get to watch change from beginning to end. And then
Shallan.
Also in flashbacks. And Shallan, Shallan changes a lot. And you're talking about things that just doesn't seem like something the character would do. So in Rhythm of War, there was times I felt that way about Shallan, where I was like, I just don't feel like this character would do this.
I get that a few times too in that book.
Yeah, but it usually like played out in some way where it was like, okay, that kind of makes sense.
Right.
Like I
the whole her and Ghost Bloods was kind of some of that Ghost Blood stuff was a little weird.
But when I think about whenever I saw this in the show notes, so I thought about to my mind, which we just got done reading Wizard and Glass, so maybe that's why it's fresh. But to me, watching Roland change from the gunslinger to Wizard and Glass is probably the most dramatic change that I've seen in a character in a book that we've read for the show, because I mean it's just night and day different. Just the gunslinger version of Roland versus the now he's with Susanna and Eddie and Jake, and this sort of mentor version of Roland. Like it's just such a drastic difference, and the characters in the book with Roland see it too and comment on it, and I think that helps deliver it. The example you gave is kind of like a bad character change. It's like where a character
it's definitely a bad character
very unnaturally changed. And I'm trying to think of an example like that. If our whack-a-mamie fan theory of Shallan being some kind of sleeper agent where she hears the word like Mockingjay and then she turns into like this rogue killer kind of thing, that would have been I would have been like, all right, that's way off base. I'm out. Sorry, Sanderson, I'm out.
Right.
That would have been that. And I really thought when we were reading that part, I was like, they're gonna do this. Sanderson's really gonna do this. And I'm so glad I was wrong about that.
I mean, he definitely made it seem like there was something behind the scenes with her.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, there was, but it didn't turn out to be what.
That. Yeah, which
it wasn't like that.
She wasn't like River Song or something.
Yeah, I mean, like
River
I said,
Song is Doctor Who. I mean, River from Firefly.
River Tam.
Serenity. I don't remember her last name.
Yeah, I can't remember either. I think it's Tam.
I'm looking at my books trying to think of another good character change example or bad character change example.
Well, that's the one, like I said, I haven't done a ton of series. And this one is like, again, it's more like they're standalone stories, but with the same character. And it's not like it's like a Lord of the Rings where all those books are like a big telling of one story. I mean, he's got he introduced in the second book like an arch nemesis guy, kind of like a Moriarty.
Oh yeah.
And he's like, it's this guy Professor Fell, and he's like, the underworld like kingpin, and so that carries over, and that story of him interacting and trying to figure out all this stuff carries over. But each story is definitely different, but like it's just the stark contrast from one book to the next where it's like, that's not the character from that book, that's not the character from that book. It's just like his character for each book fits the narrative of that book.
Yeah.
And like sometimes he's like really meek and like comes off as a weakling, and in one book he's like, this swashbuckler like fighter, and then he's back to that thing, and then it's like, and you see it in a lot of the comments, because once I picked that up myself, I started reading the comments in that book, and then each book on, I've been like, okay, let me read the comments, and they're all saying the same thing, like, who is this character?
Yeah.
It's very interesting, but again, it's hard. I mean, it's hard to write I mean, like I said, I'm 8 or 9 books into it, I think. I mean, that's hard to keep a character consistent over that many books, regardless of how long. I mean, they're not long books, but again, I don't know if I could do it. I'm not a writer, so and And I mean, like I said, but they're entertaining, so it kind of like covers that up somewhat.
This is a different topic, but I'm getting the vibe here that like have you ever read a book or a series that you enjoyed, but you really feel like I shouldn't enjoy this? Like there's like I can't put my finger on why I like it so much.
Right.
I'm getting that vibe. Like you're like this is bad character writing, but yet I really like it. I really like reading it.
Exactly.
I want to get to the end.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've got several examples of that. Honestly, I read that book, The Glass Hotel, by Emily St. John Manuel. That book, I recently was I'm working on a video game idea with a friend of mine for his game, and there's like one chapter in The Glass Hotel that I thought this could be a whole book. But it's like one chapter, and it doesn't exist outside of that chapter. And so I kind of took that idea from that chapter and kind of twisted it into this like more like video gamey Silent Hill style story. But like the Glass Hotel is full of all these like, you know, it feels like you're sitting in a diner listening to the other tables have conversations that are not connected, but they're all interesting for some reason. And this entire book's that way. Like, you keep listening to it, waiting for the mystery or whatever the hook is to kick in, and then it never does. But then by the end of the book, you're just like, that's just what this was just like these random windows into people's lives, and it never connected. And it connects, but it never becomes a story. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I actually liked the book. I actually think it's a really good book, but I can't recommend it to people because I think you get halfway through it, you're like, what the hell am I reading? And then another book that's like that, there's another one I told you about, A Demon in Silver.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a book called A Demon in Silver that is a really good book, but it has some really bad moments in it where I'm like, oh, this is so corny. This is so corny. But the good parts are so good that I
exactly.
I actually think we should do A Demon in Silver one day, because I would be interested with how you feel about it. But yeah, sometimes something, just the theme of it, just something about it hits with you just the right way. And it's like, you know, and it sounds to me like this character that you're talking about that changes so much, it could just be that like there are like Indiana Jones type characters and stories where it's just like this character, it kind of changes from story to story, but it always kind of fits the narrative and the theme of that.
Yes,
of that
it's
story.
definitely like that.
Yeah, and you know, that could be intentional, that it's written that way. You know,
I mean, it definitely could be. I mean, like I said, I've been hooked, which is really what the good thing is the first book was really good.
Yeah.
And then the second book was pretty good too. And so then by that time I'm like, okay, I've got to listen to or read all the other books because I can't not listen.
Yeah.
Because I want to know what happens regardless of
why don't we do
what the story is.
All right, so next week, why don't we do a guilty pleasures episode? We pick a few guilty pleasures to talk about. Like this book is you know, maybe not the best, but I really love it for some reason or another, you know, which I don't know. The Glass Hotel is hard to say it's a bad book because she's a really good writer, but it's just not her best work, and it's just it's the hardest to recommend people. But I'm sure I could come up with some other examples of like, I really like this book, but it's not really the best book.
Right. Oh, I've got a few of those, definitely.
But one criticism that I have let's touch base on Children of Time before we end this thing. And again, we're not gonna do the full review yet. We'll do that after I finish the book, which I'll try to get through it before the next episode. I'll try to catch up with you. The book reads fast. I'll tell you what,
it does.
I keep going back and doing the same chapter again because I'm doing it mostly on audiobook. I only put the bookmark here just so I could show on the podcast, but I've been listening to the audiobook. And with me, sometimes with audiobooks, when I listen to a chapter, I go, did I really listen to it? I'm not positive whether I really listened to it or not. And so I go back and listen to it again. And I've done that so many times.
So not to like spoil, like as far as what we think about this book, the one thing that it took me a while to get, and even though I'm done, it's consistent throughout this book, is I don't know how much time has passed.
Oh no.
And
like thousands of years,
with the spiders, like, so each iteration of the spiders, you have Portia and you have like, but they're not the same spider. Like one could be like Brianna and Bianca.
Yeah.
And like, so like they start out the next chapter, because the book goes back and forth between the human side and then the spider side.
Yeah.
So you listen, so like the spider would end, and then you listen to the human, and then they go back to the spider. And it would take me a while to figure out if it was present time, if 50 years have gone by, 100 years have gone by. And then it took me a while to figure out if it was the same Portia, because she, name is Portia every time.
Yeah.
And then you find out like, oh, okay, this is like a long time. And then like the one thing that I will say is like some of the time stuff doesn't match up between the humans and the spiders, and it like, I don't know, it's
because of
some of that is very confusing.
So I think it matches up, but it is confusing. They leave breadcrumbs sometimes where you can tell, like there's the part where they say the transmission changed or whatever, and then in the human story, I'm trying to think, Holston asks the ship to send the answers to or Lane or somebody says, send the answers to the questions or whatever, and then whenever they do the spider story, they see the transmission changed, and so you can say, oh, well, that must be the time whenever that lined up. Or no, they send the answers to the satellite, I guess.
Right.
I see it's confusing to try to line up, but there are breadcrumbs. They're supposed to help you line it up. But yeah, so the spiders, it's funny, you and I had an opposite opinion. I said, oh, I love the human chapters, but I really just kind of breezed through the spider ones. Like I'm not paying that much attention to them. And then you said, oh, I love the spider chapters. I'm just breezing through the human chapters. And so that's funny that we had different, the opposite reactions there. But the spider, the second or third spider chapter, Portia says that she's a new version of Portia, and her previous versions would have known something or would have done something. But it's not until later on in the spider chapters that they really start hinting that not only are they ancestors of their previous, like they're not only ancestors of Portia, but they seem to carry memories.
Yes, they do. Yes.
Yeah, because she even recalls things from the previous Portia.
Yeah.
And they didn't reveal that right away. That kind of fills in.
Right. And you'll get more of that in the book too, like later on. But yeah. So they definitely like pass down through neuroscience and biology or whatever. Like, and it took me a while to figure out the kind of the science of the spiders too, because it's all biological. It's not like the humans build a computer out of parts to do this, whereas they build a computer out of organic material and are able to, like, what I thought was cool is like if they wanted to do something, they would make a sack with whatever the liquid is inside it that would, like, they would give to someone else, and they would drink that liquid and gain that knowledge. I was like, that's pretty cool.
They start trading knowledge with other tribes and all that.
Yes.
So and
then some of the space travel stuff was very confusing to me on the human side.
It's confusing. Where I'm at now, they've went to another colonization planet or another I forget what they call it, terraforming planet, and then they discover that the planet's like covered in some gray like algae or something.
Fern, algae, something. And, I kept thinking of gray kudzu, like everywhere.
Taking over. And I was just, dude, this is so off topic, but I was just telling somebody the other day that when I was a kid, it seemed like kudzu was everywhere. And,
I know, right?
And now it's not as much. We conquered the kudzu.
We conquered kudzu.
But yeah, like this whole planet's like overtaken by some gray kudzu, and they're like on some. That's exactly where I am right now. I fell asleep listening to this part. I got to go back. See, that's another thing too, is I fall asleep listening to the audiobook. But I can't find the time to read right now because of things going on, so I'm doing the audiobook, but I do struggle. I have to keep going back. But it is confusing because the scenery of those two places are so similar that you're like, are they on a different planet? Are they still back on the and then another thing is, and I have a theory about Professor Karn and the satellite, and I know that you know because you finished the book, so don't tell me. But I find it strange that like she sort of woke up and gave them instructions to go down to the planet, and to kill the saboteurs or whatever, but to bring Holston back and all that. But then she doesn't show up again. Like I'm like 3 or 4 chapters past that, and they haven't talked to her again. And I don't think she would just be hanging out in the satellite. I'm thinking she's still in sleep this whole time, and that's like an AI version of her. Because I know that she made an AI version of herself, but there also seems to be like this other
computer thing
that I think is somehow her real memories being adopted by the computer somehow, but she's still asleep. But anyway.
Well, that so the part that you were talking about, where they go, so like the one thing that confused me with the humans is their sleeping cycle and how long they were. Like, I wish at the beginning of each chapter they were like 50 years later or 100 years later. So like they go to the green planet, and Kern, forces them to leave.
Yeah.
And they go back into the sleep thing, and then they wake up and they're going to put those people on the moon base. And that's when the mutiny happens.
Yeah.
And then like the mutineers steal the shuttle with Lane and Holston.
Yeah.
And then they just fly right back to the green planet. And I'm like, but you were sleeping in stasis. Like, that part, I didn't understand how, like, so they go to the green planet, then Holston goes back into stasis, and then he's woken up to this crazy mutineer thing. And I'm like, how long of a time? Because they got in the shuttle and basically flew right back to that planet in like a very short period of time. And so like, but I'm like, that kind of just didn't jive with me. I couldn't wrap my head around
them
like
on the moon of that planet, right? Of the green
planet. But I'm talking like the way the forward part of that made it seem like it was a very long time from the time they left the green planet until they got to the moon to establish that colony.
Yeah.
Whereas the return trip from the moon back to that planet was like very instantaneous.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. Did they go somewhere else whenever
like it just said
to leave, and then they decided, well, there's not a better. So what I think might have happened, I don't remember now, but what I think might have happened is that they looked for another planet in like that solar system, like in that area, couldn't find one, and said, well, we're just going to try the moon. So they came back to it. I don't know. I don't remember. I had to go back and read that part, but it's intentionally disorienting because
it is.
From Holston's perspective, he's waking up.
He's disoriented, yes.
And he has no idea how much time has passed, but then he sees that Lane is aged, and so he knows that he's been asleep longer than she has.
Right.
And I liked, dude, every human chapter feels like a Doctor Who episode. Like it is. That's what I like about this book. It's like a whole season of Doctor Who.
That was wacky.
Chapters too, but mostly the humans are like each human chapter is like could be a book. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I mean, essentially each human chapter is almost like Holston waking up from
1,000 years,
however long. And what's weird too is so they get to the green planet, and they said they've been. It basically took about 2,000 years from the time they left Earth to get to the green planet.
Yeah,
and then there's a part, I don't know if you've gotten to it yet or not, it's no spoiler or anything, but they were like, the ship is like 2,300 years old. So it took them 2,000 years to get to the green planet. And then from that point until the end of the book covers about 250 years, roughly.
Okay.
So I think they sleep in obviously shorter bursts, but again, that's another thing that doesn't jive with what happens on the ship and how much time it kind of makes it you think that.
But I think it does though, because we're only seeing the perspective of certain Porsches. But other Porsches have been born and died.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like in that 100-year, 200-year time span.
But they talk about,
and it changes. Like, I mean, like, they go from like, oh, they just met the ants, to like the ants are like the Borg, and they've taken over like entire sections of the continent and all this kind of stuff.
Well, there's a part when you get toward the end where like the spider chapter ends, and you're like, okay, that was kind of cool. And then like the next spider chapter begins, and it's like leaps and bounds technologically wise from where you left them off, and you're just like, oh my god, like that's insane. Like I really dug the story, and I'm interested to see, because again, they ended it really well, and it ended it where you're like, okay, they set up a next book kind of
And
thing.
see, that's another thing too. We were just talking about how there's so many series out. I didn't know this was a series. I thought this was this one book, and I wanted to
I
read
guess there's just two more, I
but there's two
think.
more. Yeah, it's a trilogy. Yeah, I like it so far. The one thing I'll say is I don't feel like the characters change much. We just talk. Well, Portia changes, but the Holston and Lane, they're basically the same for at least the first half of the book that I've read.
Well, the thing with that too is you've got, they were asleep for 2,000 years and they wake up, and then like I said, the rest of the book from that point on, from when they're originally woken up, is like 250 years. But like in a lot of these parts with Holston, he may be awake for 2 or 3 days,
Yeah.
and then he's right back into sleeping.
Oh, yeah,
So
most
like
of the time, yeah,
like so his character hasn't really done anything
yeah,
in 2,200 years other than a few days.
yeah.
Which is very strange.
So I've thought about this. One of the things you and I talked about outside of the podcast was that the human chapters seem very plot driven, whereas it seems like there's more character development in the spider chapters. And I think it's because of the carrying of the memories thing. We got to see Portia change, even though she's not. We're speaking of her like she's one person, but she's really been thousands of spiders throughout the course of the book. But like. But like we only have seen like Holston is just one human. Like he can't die and then carry his memories to another human,
Right.
And so he just has to keep going to sleep and waking up. But one thing I thought was weird in the book, they never mention any of these characters eating. Nobody eats in this universe. And it makes sense to me that eating would not be as important as it would be in other stories, because they sleep. If you sleep for 1,000 years
long,
and then you wake up, you're gonna eat, and then but it's not like you have to accumulate more food because you slept for so long. You know what I mean? Like as long as they keep putting themselves back to sleep, they only need so much food, but it still is finite, right? Like, the part I'm at, they've been awake for a while now because they're investigating this satellite at this other terraforming planet, and they have whole crews of people over there that have set up shop and everything. And they talk about how Lane's crew is like they've all like become this clique, and they're real irreverent, and she reminds me of B'Elanna Torres, the Lane character, the engineer.
Right.
Yeah. But
what's also interesting with that whole part is so when you're first introduced to Holston and he's woken up, you find out she calls him old man because he's literally the oldest person that there is. And then over the course of the story, they sleep in different time intervals until the point where he becomes younger than like Lane is, but she still calls him old man, but like, so there's the story, depending on like how much they've grown, like she may have been awake for, I don't know, like 2 years maybe while he was sleeping, and then he wakes up.
Yeah.
And then she goes to sleep, and then he's up, and then he goes to sleep, and they're both asleep. That whole part is kind of interesting. And the other thing I was thinking the whole time I'm reading, like the humans, and they keep doing that, I'm like, don't their muscles atrophy, or like what's the whole like? Because like Lane or Holston, like a couple times when they open his pod, he like jumps up like he's literally woke up from a nap and not been laying in one position for 100 years.
Yeah, even like Alien and stuff like that, they're like they're like sore and can't move well and stuff like that.
I know, right? But no, I really like this. I really enjoyed this read. It was very entertaining.
Wait to get further into it. I mean, I like what I've read so far. I really it felt like a breath of fresh air reading sci-fi again. Which I actually have been reading. I haven't been reading it since we started Children of Time, but between the last book and this one, I read a little bit of that book we were talking about, Empire of Silence, and it also deals with this cryosleep thing a lot. And in that book, they have like different levels of cryosleep depending on how aristocratic you are or how much you can afford. And there is like a cheaper version where it's like you still age slowly. But then the people that are real wealthy, they basically wake up and it's like no time has passed. And there's an element of that story where I won't spoil it because I do think we should read that. A character goes to sleep and he has no idea how long. And he wakes up in a place where like their calendar's different than his. And so he's like... he has no idea. But I can imagine in these futuristic worlds, in these novels and TV shows and things where this is just Wayland Yutani, Alien, it's like these people are contractors and this is their way of life, that they sleep for like 7 years, get to a planet, they do their mining gig or whatever it is, then they go to sleep for another 7 years, get back home. And it's like in that time period, 30 years has passed. What are you coming back home to? You know what I mean? Like, if you were like, oh, I got to take this job because, I got to pay for my wife and kids. Well, when you get back, your kid's like 30 and your wife passed away of old age.
Exactly.
Like what life, like what, it must be nomadic people that are just like have no connection to the rest of society.
I'm a big fan of, especially the Alien franchise. The first two movies, Alien and Aliens, they're just phenomenal movies. After that, they're, But at the end of the first movie,
I like them all for different reasons. But but it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Some of them are guilty pleasures for me, and some of them are actually good movies.
Yeah, the first two are actually good movies. The other one's kind of guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
But at the end of the first one, once she kills, shoots the alien out into space, she gets into the sleep thing.
Yeah.
And then she's picked up. I just watched it not too long. I think it was 70 years later.
Okay, yeah.
And so when she's back on Earth or wherever she is, at the beginning of the second movie, they show her a picture of her daughter who's like 80 years old, and she's just like, oh my God, like, I missed that her whole life essentially.
That's crazy.
That was a pretty cool little kind of snippet that they threw in at the beginning of that movie. Because you couldn't be like, they're talking about sending people to Mars at some point, in the near future. Like, you're literally going to have to be no attachments, or you just don't care.
Yeah.
Because, even though they're not going to sleep, it's going to take them years to do that and years to come back at some point.
You're committing your life to this.
You're committing your life to this, right?
Which, by the way, just Elon, get full self-driving working before we.
Before we hit.
It's only been like 10 years on that. We'll worry about Mars after that.
Right. But yeah, I'm excited for you to get to.
I'm gonna stop questioning whether I understood the chapter or not, and I'm just gonna keep reading. I'm not gonna go back and reread, and that way I'll actually get all the way through it, and then we can talk about how we feel about it. I know that I like it so far. I do have a hard time imagining what 2 more books would be like, though. I don't know what to expect from from that.
Right.
Not just
it's like I said, the end they do set up the next book well. So
yeah. It's not like Stormlight Archive. It's hard to imagine, well, what's going to happen next because this character is so powerful. How do they, like what's going to happen next with this character, but it's just hard to predict. Whereas with these books, it's like, I can't imagine another book of like them just going to sleep for 200 years and waking up again and going to sleep for 200 years and waking up again. But if they don't do that, is it going to feel like it fits the theme of this book?
It does. I'll say it does.
All right. Well, I can't wait to get through it.
Yes.
And it's been a good episode.
Yeah.
I saw Zord Commander at the gym the other day, and he said, when are y'all going to post another episode? So here it is, Zord Commander.
Are the other, what do we have? 2 that were waiting to be posted?
No,
Those are posted now? Or
no, I've got 1 and then this one.
Okay, so the last Wizard and Glass.
Yeah, and I have it edited. It's on my computer. I just got to post it. I edited it last night and rendered it and everything, so I'll upload it.
So you're going to get 2 episodes coming.
Yeah. I'll have to space them out somehow. I wonder if I should do this one first and then that one, because this one's more topical. Whereas like the Wizard and Glass review could be any time.
Anything.
It's not a weekly thing. I don't know. So
before we get to Wolves.
Yeah, I'm excited for that too.
Dude, I'm excited for you for that one. It's going to blow your mind.
Yeah. Speaking of not knowing what's going to happen, I have no idea. The Wizard and Glass was just left with so much open-endedness that it could be anything. The next book could be anything at all. There's no carryover from the previous book,
Blow your mind.
Which every book, no, not every book. How did the drawing of the 3 start? Did the drawing of the 3 start right away with him attacking the lobstrosities?
Essentially wakes up on the beach and they're biting his toes and fingers off.
Okay, yeah. That's right. And then, trying to remember then, how did the next book start?
I can't remember how it started. That was
I was trying to remember if it was something that carried over from the previous book. 'Cause, like Wizard and Glass carries over because of Blaine the Train.
Right.
And at the ending of Drawing of the Three, I don't think there was like a big cliffhanger that carried over.
Well, I think no, because I think the end of Drawing of the Three is basically where they come together as the quartet, and then the next book starts off where they've been in the woods camping
it starts
for
with
months,
the bear.
and then you get the bear.
Yeah.
And so there was a time period between. I don't think it was very long, maybe a couple months between the end of Drawing of the Three and Wastelands. This one picks up. Wolves of the Call will pick up pretty much right where it ended, where Wizard and Glass ended with, after they left the glass castle and stuff. So
yeah.
From here on out, it's pretty linear as far as, well, I won't say linear because there's definitely more time travel coming, but like it's linear as in like one book ends and there's not like a time break. It's pretty much, right into the story.
All right. Well, let's end this thing and lead into the next one. So thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe to us on iTunes and YouTube, and we'll see you next week.